The mysterious fate of the Soviet spacecraft, Cosmos 954, a nuclear secret in space. In the cold shadow of the Cold War, when the world's two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, competed fiercely for technological and military dominance, space was not just a frontier for exploration. It was a battlefield in orbit. Among the many secret projects launched during this tense era, one stands out for its mystery, danger, and the quiet panic it caused on Earth, the Soviet spacecraft Cosmos 954. On the surface, Cosmos 954 seemed like an ordinary satellite, part of the Soviet Union's vast space program. But buried beneath layers of secrecy was a terrifying truth: it carried a nuclear reactor into orbit. And when things went wrong, it rained radioactive debris over one of the world's most remote and unprepared regions. The full story of Cosmos 954 is one of secrecy, denial, and the haunting legacy of a space-age accident that could have been far worse. The Cold War and the battle beyond Earth. By the 1970s, space had become an extension of military strategy. The United States and the Soviet Union were not only racing to the moon but also to control space itself. Both nations sought ways to monitor, intercept, and even destroy each other's assets in orbit. The Soviet Union had developed a series of radar ocean reconnaissance satellites, RORSATs, designed to track U.S. naval fleets anywhere on Earth. These satellites, however, required immense power to operate their radar systems. Conventional solar panels could not produce enough energy, especially when operating over dark regions or shadowed orbits. So the Soviets turned to a dangerous but effective solution: nuclear power. These satellites were equipped with compact nuclear reactors called BES-5, each containing around 50 kilograms of uranium-235, enough to power the satellite for months. The Soviets had launched several RORSATs successfully before Cosmos 954, but the risk was enormous. If a malfunction occurred, a nuclear reactor could fall back to Earth, spreading radioactive materials across vast areas. The launch of Cosmos 954. On September 18, 1977, the Soviet Union launched Cosmos 954 from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. To the public, it was just another satellite, part of a long series of Cosmos missions. But behind the scenes, Western intelligence quickly identified it as a RORSAT, a nuclear-powered surveillance satellite orbiting Earth at an altitude of about 270 kilometers. At first, everything appeared normal. The satellite began its reconnaissance mission, sending radar data back to Soviet analysts. But within weeks, something went terribly wrong. Ground controllers noticed erratic behavior, loss of control, unpredictable orbit changes, and communication failures. By December 1977, it became clear that Cosmos 954 was no longer responding to commands. Normally, once a RORSAT finished its mission, Soviet engineers would boost the reactor core into a disposal orbit, a higher orbit where the radioactive material would remain safely for centuries. But with Cosmos 954 unresponsive, that final maneuver was impossible. The satellite's orbit began to decay, and its eventual re-entry into Earth's atmosphere became inevitable. The race against time. The United States was among the first to notice the deteriorating orbit. Through its global tracking network, American analysts realized that the Soviet satellite was coming down, and that it contained a live nuclear reactor. This was not just a Soviet problem. A re-entry of such a satellite could scatter radioactive debris over any part of the globe, depending on where it fell. The U.S. warned its allies and quietly prepared for possible contamination. The Canadian government, whose northern territories lay along potential re-entry paths, was alerted. By the time the operation ended in April 1978, only about 1% of the reactor's uranium fuel had been recovered. The rest had burned up in the atmosphere, spreading trace radiation that, fortunately, did not cause measurable harm to human populations. Still, the cleanup effort cost over $14 million, and Canada later billed the Soviet Union $6 million for damages. After some diplomatic negotiation, the USSR paid half that amount. The aftermath and secrecy. In the aftermath, both superpowers were forced to confront the risks of nuclear technology in space. The Soviet Union temporarily suspended its RORSAT program to redesign safety systems, while the United States began reviewing its own policies on nuclear-powered satellites. For years, details of Cosmos 954's mission and the extent of radioactive contamination were kept secret or heavily censored. Many in the scientific community suspected that the true amount of debris, and the potential contamination, was far greater than publicly admitted. Some even speculated that parts of the reactor core may still lie undiscovered in Canada's remote northern wilderness, buried under snow and soil, still emitting faint radiation decades later. A legacy of caution. The fall of Cosmos 954 remains one of the most haunting reminders of how the Cold War's technological ambitions nearly brought disaster to Earth. It demonstrated that even the most advanced systems could fail, and that the secrecy of superpowers often magnified the risks. In the decades that followed, space agencies worldwide adopted stricter safety measures for nuclear-powered spacecraft. Reactors were built with automatic ejection systems to push them into safe disposal orbits in case of malfunction. New protocols were established for tracking and recovering hazardous debris. Yet, despite all the progress, the Cosmos 954 incident continues to echo through history as a cautionary tale, a secret nuclear crisis that nearly became a global catastrophe. Behind the scenes, both governments began preparing for a worst-case scenario. In the US, a secret program known as Operation Morning Light was coordinated with Canada. Its mission, to track Cosmos 954's descent and recover any radioactive material that might reach the ground. The fiery fall, January 1978. On January 24, 1978, after months of decaying orbit, Cosmos 954 finally re-entered Earth's atmosphere. It streaked across the early morning sky over Canada's Northwest Territories, breaking apart over an area stretching from Great Slave Lake to northern Alberta. Witnesses described it as a fiery trail of light, like a falling star that refused to fade. But what they were seeing was not a meteor, it was a nuclear-powered satellite disintegrating in the upper atmosphere. The re-entry spread debris over a vast 124,000 square kilometer region of northern Canada, a remote, sparsely populated wilderness of forests, lakes, and tundra. The world had just witnessed one of the most significant nuclear accidents ever to occur outside Earth's atmosphere. Operation Morning Light, the cleanup. Immediately after the fall, a joint US-Canadian recovery mission swung into action. Codenamed Operation Morning Light, it involved hundreds of military personnel, scientists, and radiation experts combing the Arctic landscape in freezing temperatures. The goal was to locate pieces of Cosmos 954 and recover radioactive material before it could cause harm. Using aircraft equipped with radiation detectors, teams scanned vast stretches of wilderness, landing whenever they found a suspicious signal. Over several months, search teams recovered dozens of fragments of the satellite. Some pieces emitted deadly levels of radiation, so powerful that prolonged exposure could have caused severe illness or death. The mysterious fate of Cosmos 954 is more than just a Cold War anecdote, it's a chilling example of how human ambition and secrecy can collide with nature's unpredictability. A spacecraft meant to spy from the heavens became a radioactive rain of fire across the Earth. Even today, its story raises uncomfortable questions: how many secrets still orbit above us? How much danger is hidden behind classified missions? And if another nuclear satellite were to fail tomorrow, would the world even know before it fell from the sky? The wreckage of Cosmos 954 may be buried under ice and forest, but its legacy, a blend of fear, mystery, and silent warning, continues to haunt the space age.